All right, we are right at 7 o'clock, so I'll call tonight's city council meeting to order. And Jolene, could we have a roll call, please?
Council members Erickson.
Here.
Husnick.
Here.
Valento.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Mayor Bain.
Here. I invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Members of council, we have an agenda before you. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
Also move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and our agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of their choice. We do also have two planned public hearings this evening. The first being for our first regular agenda item, which is the Hidden Creek edition, and second is for the Shields Lake consideration. And so if you are here to speak on those topics, you are welcome to either speak now in open forum or for those public hearings. Those are our three planned times for public input this evening. Is there anybody signed up for open forum?
There's
All
not.
right. Anybody online, Jolene?
No attendees raising their hand to speak, Mayor.
All right, we will close open forum and bring the agenda back to council. Council, for your consideration tonight is consent agenda items 6A through 6J. I will entertain a motion or any changes.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6A through 6J.
There is a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose, and consent agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is item 7A, which is consideration of the Hidden Creek Second Edition. And Abby, you're going to start us on this.
Thank you, Mayor Bain, members of the council. Tonight before you, you have a request from John Dobbs representing Headwaters Land Development. The request for you is consideration of a final plat for Hidden Creek Second Edition. That's a 37-lot, single-family residential development on 11 acres. So up on the screen, you do see the site location where this is proposed to be at the end of Headwaters Parkway. That is the second phase of a multi-phase development. Just as a reminder, the city previously approved a preliminary plat and PUD for a 620-acre development in February of 22. In August of 23, you approved a final planned unit development and the first phase of the development, which is that kind of pinkish red area is almost fully developed out. Now we're moving on to the green in the north. Regarding the final plat for your consideration tonight, we have received comments from the city engineer. It has received watershed district approval. Overall, the plan generally conforms to the city's comprehensive plan, the zoning code, surface water management plan, engineering standards, and the such. It conforms to the preliminary plat standards and approval conditions and does meet the city's minimum standards for development. Prior to plat approval, you have a few things to consider this evening. One of them would be the vacation of a drainage and utility easement that kind of snakes through the outlot as it's platted today. The city required this in the event that those subsequent phases didn't go through, that we could loop our water up to the existing water mains to the north. Additionally, English Avenue North is at the end of the existing development. A cul-de-sac was temporarily put in, again, in the event that those subsequent phases didn't come forward. So tonight you need to hold a public hearing on the development, specifically to consider the vacation of those to consider both those vacations. State statute does require you to find that there's no public purpose for those. Staff has done analysis on this, and given the fact that we have this new development coming forward, the roads are going to connect, the utilities are going to connect through this second addition. We don't have any public purpose anymore for that utility and that roadway easement. Additionally, for your consideration tonight is a development agreement associated with Hidden Creek Second Edition. There are a couple things the developer asked for the city's consideration on in that development agreement. One would be the consideration of 3 model homes. The city has written into the development agreement the allowance for 2 model homes at the extension of English Avenue North, because we'd be able to provide the access to those 2 lots, kind of coming off of that area that's already prepped just at the end of that cul-de-sac. Additionally, the request has been to allow for parkland dedication fees tonight. That's $2,500 per lot for a total of $92,500 to be dedicated for the future parkland development of the Headwaters, the Hidden Creek neighborhood. Staff has indicated that we do believe that this should go into our park dedication fund, but that in subsequent phases, the developer could come forward with a proposal for the development of a parkland, and we could consider using those fees at that time. But right now, since no parkland's being dedicated, it should just be going into our parkland dedication fund to offset some of the costs that we need throughout the community. And then lastly, the third thing for your consideration is the consideration of deferment of the Headwaters Parkway development. So as a reminder, the city allowed for the temporary construction of Headwaters Parkway during the first phase. A requirement was that the second phase would have to have full build out of that parkway. So the developer has asked for the city's either deferment of that to a subsequent phase or something written into the development agreement that would allow for temperature or weather dependent delays to allow them to do it into June of 2025. We live in Minnesota. We all know that there's temperature and weather conditions. The development agreement is written so that we can come back and ask for those amendments at a later time. But staff's opinion is that the development agreement as written, requiring Headwaters Parkway to be built now before the release of any more building permits other than those 2 model homes, is in the public's best interest. Right now we have, we're getting close to 22 residences, 22 new families in the community. Adding more houses to this neighborhood without all of the public infrastructure in place isn't good public practice. We really should be requiring our public improvements fully developed before we add more properties. Lastly, just note there are 4 motions for your consideration tonight. Staff has written them out in the staff report. We can go through them after you hold that public hearing if you like, but there would be a minor modification to the 4th one to authorize staff to incorporate the financial securities into a single letter of credit as part of the DA approval. So for, again, in quick summary, your consideration tonight is consideration of the final plat for Hidden Creek 2nd Edition, the vacation of the English Avenue North right-of-way, the vacation of the drainage and utility easement through Hidden Creek, and the consideration of the DA. First, my recommendation would be to open the public hearing, take public comment, close the public hearing, and discuss. And I'm here to answer any questions now or later, whichever you have.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Abby. Council, before we hear from the developer and also open public comment, any first questions for Abby before we continue? All right. I know Mr. Dobbs is here. Before we open the public hearing, is there anything you wanted to present to council or anything you want us to know?
Yeah, I'll talk.
Please.
Good evening, John Dobbs from Headwaters Land Group. We appreciate all the effort that's gone in to get us to this point, and in general don't really have any objections to almost everything except for the Headwaters Parkway conversation. As I think a few of you will recall, when we stood here and talked about the first phase, we talked a lot about the neighborhood to the north as well, and no heavy trucks, no heavy equipment, any of that. The part that got left out, I think, at least from my point of view and the discussion that was just given, is that the way that this process is going, we were hoping to already be graded. It rains every 3 days. It rained last night. We're way behind. Last year it was so dry, we had to stand here and discuss with staff how to change the way we graded the site because it was so dry. This year it is as wet as I've ever seen it. I've been doing this since 1992. So the way that the process has to go, because there are people in the first phase, is we have to finish the second phase so that the residents in the first phase have a way to get out once we start working on Headwaters Parkway. Headwaters Parkway is going to take about 2 weeks. Fair assessment, Ryan? About 2 weeks. So we have to build all the second phase, streets, curb, small utilities. We'd like to get sidewalks in before we come back and tear out headwaters. Otherwise, the people that live in first phase have nowhere to go. Right now, we believe that we're going to be doing the asphalt work in the second phase probably mid-September, if not late September, just because of how the weather's going. And right now, every 3 or 4 days it rains, which means we lost today, and we will probably lose part of tomorrow as well from grading because the soil's pretty tough. What all that means is that we're into September, October before we go back and tear headwaters out of the ground, and then we shut down for 2 weeks. That time of the year, temperature, snow, rain, things don't dry. That's a public street. And then to, in my opinion, to also hold building permits on the entire 37 lots and not be willing to put any language in the developer's agreement if it gets to the point where the weather is tough is basically putting a gun to our head. And I just don't understand why. Right now, there's a 32-foot wide street holding up pretty well. For context, the reason we want to do temporary mat was right at where headwaters ended was a drain tile system that drains 2 miles to the east, used to be called Judicial Ditch Number 4. That's been pumping water into the subsoil for 100 years. I was concerned that it would destabilize the road and we'd have to come back and tear it back out. Mr. Goodman thought that it would hold up. He was right up until this spring. And right now, if you go out there, right where the road starts to curve, there is a hole in the ground about this big because the inspector for the city, our contractor, missed it. There's a piece of drain tile that got cut that's pumping water straight up. It'd be right under the curb of where headwaters would be built today. So I don't know the future any more than Mr. Goodman does, and I respect that. That being said, our intention, and what my ask has been for weeks, is that we put off the construction of headwaters until next summer. Our intent is to come back and do the third phase. We have to do headwaters, finish it before we do the third phase, because we can't have equipment coming through the north. If we could do it June 15th to June 30th of next year, we could plan, the neighbors could plan, the builder can plan. Everybody would know, hey, the road's going to be closed for 2 weeks and you got to go through the neighborhood. Don't bring your equipment, don't bring your construction equipment. I talked to all the neighbors on our north boundary, and I've been talking to them. I was talking to them tonight. They are pretty gracious so far with all the dirt and all the dust and all the stuff, but you know, I'm trying to impact them as little as possible. It looks arbitrary to me that the decision has been made that this has to be tied to building permits and we have to finish headwaters this fall. I believe what's going to end up happening is we're going to be running later than I already think. I was an optimist for a while, but I'm not anymore. It's going to be cold, we're going to be moving snow, we're going to have to move more expense because we're going to have to cure the sidewalk, asphalt, gravel, roll tests, all of those are weather and moisture dependent in the city code. Correct, Ryan? All of them are. If it gets too cold, you have to do special measures, things get more expensive. It's our road until we put the final lift in. We own it, you guys haven't accepted it. It'll be a better road next summer. My plan was to already be mostly built. I'm hoping I'll get it built before the end of September. Capstone has done a phenomenal job with the building. If you guys haven't been out there, it's really doing well. Talked to a bunch of the residents, they're all happy, life is good. We just want to systematically work our way through the process, given where we're at today, given the weather, which I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. I disagree that it's in the public's best interest to pull it in this fall. And to not have any language in the developer's agreement, my experience with that is, we start to get late in the fall, then we're going to have dialogue with the staff, and the staff's going to say to me, because I've heard this before, in the developer's agreement, it says blah, blah, blah. And then now it's like, okay, now we really have to grind it out or pay whatever cost it is to try to get asphalt in. I don't know what the rush to the red light is. I just don't. And yes, the fact that it wouldn't even go into the developer's agreement is a weather-dependent thing I kind of see as a gun to my head. And I don't understand why we're here. So that's kind of my point about that. That's the only real issue we have. The developer's agreement has extra assurity in it that, in my understanding, later in this meeting will get cleaned up for a letter of credit. So I see that as housekeeping, but this is not housekeeping.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not before the next phase. It's by June 30th of next year we'll have it done. So,
thank you.
anybody got any questions or comments?
Not yet.
I will later.
Let's move to public hearing, and then we can open it up for some discussion. All right, with that, let's open up our public hearing, and if there is anybody that would like to speak on this topic, please come to the podium, and we'll open up public hearing now. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this topic? Angeline, anybody coming forward online?
No, Mayor.
All right, leave it open here for just another moment. And not seeing anyone come forward, we'll close public hearing and bring conversation back to council. Council, let's open it up for any questions that you might have, both on the presentation from Abby, comments we may have heard, comments we heard from Mr. Dobbs. Go ahead and let's just open it up.
My question would be for Ryan. I mean, it seemed like this seems like a really reasonable request based on what's going on there. And the folks that have been doing this job too, they have a proven track record. And so I think they could possibly get that done the way they're saying. And so I don't know unless Ryan has some really compelling.
So Mayor, City Council, during staff discussion, the reasons why we are requiring the parkway as part of Phase 2, as it was discussed in part of Phase 1, so it's not something new that's coming, but the reasons we're requiring that is it's gone through one phase freestyle cycle, right? So all the subcuts from the end of the East Parkway where it stops now to the intersection up into the existing development was subcut last year. Fabric was put down, all the sand was put down. About 5 inches or so of Class 5 was put down. It was left low on purpose, knowing we're gonna have to come in and reclaim the existing bituminous temporary mats. And that would generate some other Class 5. We're talking 2 weeks of construction, right, with 22 homes. Right now you got 22 homes out there they're gonna have to go up and around an existing neighborhood that's gonna go past 63 homes plus 21 other townhomes. That's if they take the straight route. Otherwise, they could go 3 other side streets in effect and drive past 57 more homes. If we allow Phase 2 to go in, that's 37 more homes, plus all their contractors that are gonna be driving up past all those homes I just outlined. So to deal with 2 weeks of construction, now, why we're only got 22 homes trapped in there, it makes the most sense to get it done now. And then we're talking 2 weeks of construction. So there's not really much work to really do there, but the longer we wait, prices will probably go up. And we're gonna affect more residents, not only in this development, but already people that have been living to the north for well over 20 years, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid. It's only gonna get worse and more congested as you wait. Right? If public safety has been a concern too, because even right now with the narrow roads that were allowed, Al can't get a fire truck through there. So this is the reason why this was written in the development agreements. I'll open that with any questions you might have.
Follow-up questions for Ryan? I have concerns over allowing the delay in the construction. I think my concerns are primarily, I'm hearing weather-related concerns, and can we just wait to do this till next spring? And with that comes some thought that maybe next spring is easier, and we don't know what that is. And so I'm concerned on allowing such a long time frame of delay, that if the entire project were to be delayed, that's one thing. But simply to allow for the sequencing to be changed for weather, again, I just find us on this path on adjustments for weather, and this doesn't lead to a good place. And so for the reasons Ryan indicated around, just concerns over public safety, we've already given some concessions on this particular street related to the design. That was a fairly big concession for us. I have some concerns over allowing the change in sequencing. Any other, I guess, we'll open to other points of feedback. There are other components on this project. We can start walking through those motions or any other questions folks may have. Hearing no other questions, if we wanted to, I'm happy to entertain a motion if anyone's ready.
Can I make a comment?
Sure, a comment if you'd like to come to the podium, for sure.
First of all, I don't know what concession you're referring to on Headwaters Parkway. By the way, I'm Paul Bruggeman, working with John on the development of this. So I don't know.
We gave you a design concession when you were on Headwaters Parkway as part of our previous approval.
Okay, maybe somebody can tell me what that is, because I don't think you have. We have a temporary road map, but the road itself was never a compromise or a reduction on that Headwaters Parkway. My understanding.
But that was a concession. That was not our standard practice, right?
So, to Ryan's point, you know, you're forcing us to put this in, and if we don't get it in, you're telling us we can't pull building permits on the phase that we're putting in. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's
I appreciate
asinine.
your
It's almost,
opinion.
it's vindictive.
I appreciate your opinion, but I also find the language of we're holding a gun to your head kind of offensive.
Well, I didn't say that, but I'm telling you that to put in there that we'll do it at our best efforts to try to get it in, barring weather, we don't even know. This year has been very hard for us. We don't even have our site graded. We don't even have it halfway graded. And
Maybe this phase isn't ready to move forward then, sir, with all respect. And again, I don't want to entertain this conversation right now. All right. Ready for motions, if anyone's ready for motions?
So motions, are we talking about these other things about the parkland, or is this just?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the 3 model homes, can we discuss that a little bit? Is there why wouldn't we, if there's ask for 3, why is that not possible?
So they've asked for 3, and we've written into without having the infrastructure in place, the public utilities, the roadways, we're concerned that we'd be adding more homes into a neighborhood that we can't adequately serve and protect. So the 2 homes just to the north of the existing roadway, we'd be able to access with the temporary roadways that would be in place. We thought that 2 was a reasonable request. Customary practice for the city has been 1. And so to ask for 3 is just a little bit above and beyond what we are customarily would do, and we can still protect and serve those 2 existing or those 2 future homes.
Where is the proposed 3rd home? On the map, do you have, can you
I
point
believe,
that out?
if I remember right, it's lot 7. So it isn't even the area where the temporary cul-de-sac is located. They would have to do some further site grading and improvements in that area to be able to get access in. Did you have other questions, Councilmember Roberts, about the other items?
So the parkland dedication, I could see maybe going forward where a developer is going to spend this money, wants to keep it within that neighborhood. I can see that. I would suspect that'd be a policy change that we would have to do on something like that. So going forward, I'd be in favor of this, but unfortunately, my understanding, that's not the policy of the city, so it'd be hard to make that change for me right now.
This is only, the completion of Hidden Creek Second Edition is only half of the whole neighborhood. We still will have conversations about parkland dedication with the subsequent phases, the 3rd phase being that whole other half or even portions of that half. And I do think it's appropriate to have those conversations as we kind of continue forward. But right now, without having any sort of parkland development even proposed, and knowing the council, knowing the needs of our park system as it is, staff believes that it would be in the city's best interest to put that money into the Parkland Dedication Fund to be going to those improvements needed throughout the community, since the existing residents, the future residents of these phases, are going to be using that existing parkland system for quite some time.
And then one last thing, I understand the frustration, Mr. Bergman and Mr. Dobbs. We have done some concessions. We allowed this parkway to be built, half-built. We did allow outside engineering to come in, which is 2 things that we typically have not done here in the past. And so I understand the frustration, but please know that we are willing to work with developers, that we want to help wherever we can. I think we have done a pretty good job of doing that. I would hope that if we do get into a weather situation and it's close, that maybe there's a little bit of give and take on allowing some of these building permits to be issued, if that's what it takes. But just to continue to work in good faith with staff, and we appreciate the development and everything that you've done here and look forward to working with you in the future.
We're not open to additional
Okay,
public
but I
comment.
can't sign a developer's agreement that the city can arbitrarily hold up our building permits. I mean, that, I get, you know, I mean, there's a letter of credit in place. I don't even know who thought of that we putting millions of dollars in the ground, and if we don't get a road in, you're gonna hold up my building permits?
It sounds like we find the road to be pretty important.
Yeah, but listen to what you're doing. I mean, look at the consequences if we don't do it. It's insane. I mean, I agree, if we can do it in weather and things straighten out and we're able to move our project along, but you're asking me to sign something
Sir, we're not gonna
that we
argue
don't
about
have
this
any
this
control over. And we would work with the staff, try to get the road in if we can do it. We have the money, we have the letter of credit, we have everything in place. But to make me sign a developer's agreement that says you're gonna hold up building permits? I really would love to know who on the staff that
Sir,
came up with that
sir,
idea.
We're not doing this evening.
Way to work with your developers and encourage us to come.
And Mayor, I was just gonna remind you then, as you take the motions, you'll wanna take them in order as they are on the sheet to make sure you vacate things before you approve the plat, so.
Understand. Any other questions related to the motions on the table that are before us? All right, we can walk through these, and again, happy to entertain discussion along the way if anyone has questions or points of discussion. So first would be motion to approve, and I would move that council approve resolution 723-2401, approving the vacation of the unused utility easement as part of the Hidden Creek First Edition. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this particular motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. Second, I would move council approve resolution 723-2402, approving the vacation of the unused English Avenue North roadway easement as it was platted as part of the Hidden Creek First Edition. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this one? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Third, motion to approve resolution 723-2403, approving the Hidden Creek Second Edition final plat. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. For discussion purposes, I will also move that council approve the development agreement for the hidden plat, or for the plat of Hidden Creek Second Edition by and between the City of Forest Lake and Headwaters Land Group LLC with minor modifications by the city attorney, and to authorize staff to take steps necessary to put all financial securities associated with this development agreement and the first phase development agreement into a single letter of credit that contains the costs of the parkway once. For discussion purposes, I will make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Open to discussion.
I'd be curious if there's a number of building permits that the developer would find useful over the course of the winter if things go awry this fall and we end up having a continued wet summer as we've had. I mean, surely they don't need all the building permits to keep themselves busy over the winter, but there might be a compromise there, perhaps. Before I interject a second question, do we know that answer, or what's the?
We do not. It's just not, it's not customary practice to allow for building permits to be released without all the public improvements. And that's not just Forest Lake's way. That is a very standard development requirement, that the public improvements go in before you start building homes and introducing more residents to the neighborhood. So we did not ask that question. Staff has advised the developer, we have a lot of time. I know you get going and time goes quick, but we've got quite a bit of time between us and when snow is flying. And so I think getting these approvals, getting them out there, as a reminder to the council, we did already approve a mass grading agreement. They can go out and grade the site. They've been doing that. Getting these approvals and getting them out there to work is important, and keeping that communication open so that if we need to come back and have that conversation about release of additional building permits, we can, but we do think it's premature to be asking for that at this time.
Can somebody describe what the public safety limitation is on not having, that street? Brian, in your comments, you made motion of not able to get a fire truck. What specifically is the limitation, and can we just describe that again, what the public safety impact is? I don't know today what that is.
What we've talked about is the weight of fire trucks causes an issue on roads that have a single lift and haven't been developed all the way through. The other concern is when you start getting out into phase 2, where you start building a lot of houses, we don't know what that moisture, if we get moisture, will do to that roadway. Once again, being able to access that with heavy trucks. So if that turns into muddy, frost coming out of the ground and just us not being able to reach those houses that far ahead in construction once they start building the houses.
I appreciate the kind of the intent of the direction you're taking, Councilmember Erickson. My concern is we end ourselves up on this slippery slope of, part of one of the questions that comes to my mind is, can we authorize a building permit but hold a certificate of occupancy until that roadway is complete, so that some construction activities can take place, but we aren't impacting actual residents because we are holding that certificate of occupancy. And as those words come out of my mouth, I get concerned that we are, because of weather, we are allowing things to get resequenced in a way that is just not, I'm just not comfortable that it's the right path. So, Christina.
Sorry, Mayor, so when you said that, I wanted to let you all know that we thought about that too with the COs. And I think you need to, again, think about your future residents, right? So they may have put down money and been paid on this house. If you're now gonna be holding up that CO, they're gonna be upset. They're not gonna move into their house on time. They're gonna have to find other living arrangements. This is a real life scenario I lived in my previous community. It does happen. And so staff is really thinking about our current and future residents first and foremost when we make these recommendations to you.
Thank you for bringing that up. One of my most awful times as on council was when we were having concerns over certificate of occupancy over Lighthouse Lofts and the calls we were getting from residents who are needing to move in and needing to make some arrangements, and that pressure is not a fun place, and I'd rather just, again, avoid it altogether. So, other discussion? We do have a motion and a second on the table. I will say, I'm going to support this development agreement tonight, but I am concerned about the level of conflict in the room, and going into an agreement with this level of conflict is challenging, but this has been a long-term relationship. We've solved lots of problems. I'm happy to agree to it or support it with some optimism that we'll find a path, but I do have some concerns. So, with that, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Thank you so much. Okay, council, for our next item this evening is Shields Lake consideration. And Amanda, we're going to start with you, and then we'll open up a public hearing.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. So just point of reference in your packet, this starts at page 123. This is a vacation of a public road off of 207th Street. It's a portion of 207th. Back in 2021, the city entered into a land swap agreement with Joe and Dina Palumbo. This agreement has been sort of on hold while title issues on both the city's piece of property and the Palumbo piece of property were being dealt with. It required something similar to a quiet title action, so it was actually kind of involved. But we did finally get everything cleaned up. And the final piece of the puzzle is vacating this public road. We agreed to do so in the land exchange agreement. If you remember, the property that we are giving them is, if you go to page 25, the property that we are giving them is a piece of city property that was initially taken as parkland, but because it is wet and the low-lying nature of the property does not allow it to become developed. So we are swapping that piece of property for a small piece of property up by Shields Lake, the public boat launch, which I'm told by both Dave and Ryan that it is valuable for city purposes up there. So that's what we're getting in addition to $10,000 from Palumbo. That was the deal that was reached. The piece of 207th that is being vacated is essentially the piece that is now becoming Mr. Palumbo's driveway. So he sort of, if you think about it as a donut, he owns all of the property on the outside of the donut, and the city owns the hole in the middle. And now he's going to own everything because that's the piece that he's taking. So we just need to clean up the public right-of-way, because now, like you said, it'll be a private drive for him. As you mentioned, Your Honor, this is a public hearing, so I'd ask that you open a public hearing and then move forward.
Very good.
I'm available for questions as well.
Thank you, Amanda. With that, let's open the public hearing. If there's anyone that would like to speak on this topic, please come forward. And if you are online, please raise your hand so that Jolene can recognize you. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this topic this evening? Jolene, anyone online?
No one raising their hand, Mayor.
All right, not seeing anybody or seeing nobody come forward, I will close public hearing and bring conversation back to council. Council, happy to entertain discussion or a motion if anyone is ready.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 07-23-2405, vacating a portion of 207th Street North as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. Our next item this evening, consideration and award of our sale of bonds. And Kevin.
Mayor and City Council, I would like to welcome Bruce Kemmel from Ellers and Associates, who has assisted the city with the issuance or this process of awarding the sale of equipment certificates. Just to kick it off before I turn it over to Bruce, there are two documents that were placed in front of your computer this evening. One is an updated resolution from what was in your packet as the sale of those bonds closed this morning. So that is updated with current information from what Bruce will be going over this evening, as well as a sale report from relating to the equipment certificate sale as well. So it's a little bit reminder of how the city got to this point. As part of the 10-year capital plan, equipment certificates were identified as a funding source for 2 fire engines and 2 snowplow trucks, and leading us to this point of issuing these equipment certificates to pay for those equipment needs. So right now, the impacts are that there would be a tax levy for the next 10 years that would associate with issuing these equipment certificates. So the recommendation is for City Council to approve the award of these equipment certificates. And with that, I will turn it over to Bruce.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm just going to go through a few highlights in this sale day report that I think you all have. We did take bids at 10 o'clock this morning on the city's behalf and received 6 bids altogether in this competitive sale. If you flip forward to the bid tabulation page, you can see all 6 bids on the front and back of that page. The winning bid did come from BNY Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon Capital Management out of Pittsburgh, with a true interest rate of 3.28%. That is considerably lower than what we had estimated. We always try to estimate conservatively so there's no unpleasant surprises, but this was almost 70 basis points or 0.7% better than projected, which was more than the margin of cushion that we had put into our pre-sale report. So the market has moved a little bit and certainly helped the city. Just so you know, The debt service on these certificates will be about $11,000 per year less than what we had projected, so it'll be about $284,000 per year on average for the 10-year term. One thing I also wanted to note with the BNY bid, you can see that most of the coupons on the certificates are 4s and 5s, but the actual reoffering yields are all in a really narrow band between 3 and 3.2%. That's an indication of how flat the market is right now in terms of interest rates. And what it means also is the differential between the yield, the coupon and the reoffering yield is what generates premium. And we've had premium on past bond issues before. This one was no different, and we were able to use that to reduce the overall size of the bond issue. So it may seem a little strange, but you're issuing just over 2.2 million, but you'll be netting a little over 2.3 million for all of the capital equipment. And the difference there is because of that net premium that we were able to use and then reduce the bond size accordingly. You can also see that the bidding was very competitive. All of the bids were really in a tight band, which just shows, again, the demand for bonds in general, but also for highly rated bonds like those of Forest Lake. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But why don't I stop and see if you have any questions about the bids received or the bond sale itself?
Any questions so far?
Okay, great. So then, Mayor, I did want to just note, we did include the S&P rating report on the city. As part of this bond issuance process, certificate issuance process, we did have a good discussion with rating analysts from S&P. Your staff did a great job of preparing for that call, answering their questions essentially in advance. And the call went very, very smoothly, as did the affirmation of the city's existing rating of AA+. You may recall that AA+ is just one small notch lower than AAA, and AAA is the very highest rating that a city can get. And I was interested to note that the analyst this time made a point of saying that you're really on an upward trajectory, or they call it upward pressure, which I think is kind of funny. But long story short is they don't expect any changes in the near term within the next year or two. But if the city continues to grow and exercise strong financial management and budgeting practices, all the things you're already doing, they were kind of indicating that you would be definitely a candidate for a AAA rating at some point in the medium term, which was really encouraging. So kudos to all of you for the budget decision-making you've been doing over the last several years. And again, I just want to give credit to your team here for being very well prepared and providing all the information that shows S&P that you're on top of your game.
Do we have a clear path of what that would take to get that AAA rating, or a clear picture of what those benefits would be? Is it worth that additional effort?
That's a great question. I wouldn't advise doing anything different as a city in terms of hoarding a lot more money or making any drastic budgetary changes. I will say one thing that they were very interested in is that you're doing more in terms of financial planning, both with the CIP that you approved or adopted a couple weeks ago, as well as with the financial management plan that we'll be discussing here tonight. So it's those kind of things that don't really cost a lot or hamstring you that I would encourage doing to just keep building up your financial management metrics. But otherwise, I think the city growing, being in a prosperous area, being part of the Twin Cities Metro, all of those things will go a long way to get you there.
Thank you. Council, any follow-up questions so far? All right.
So that's all I had for the presentation. I would encourage you then to take up the resolution awarding the bonds in the reduced or revised amount of $2,205,000 to BNY Mellon.
Thank you so much. Council open for questions or a motion if anyone is ready.
Make a motion to approve resolution 723-2406, awarding the sale of $2.205 million general obligation equipment certificates to BNY Mellon.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Thank you for the work on this. I know Kevin and Bruce. All right, that moves us to our next item, which is just a great segue from our previous topic into our financial management plan. And Kevin, I think you're starting.
Yes, Mayor, City Council. From that discussion, we're moving on to our financial management plan, which again, Bruce from Ellers assisted with the city putting together. Again, this reminder of what this financial management plan really is, and Bruce will go into more detail. But just wanted to remind council that in this financial management plan presentation that you will see incorporates the 10-year capital plan that has been presented to council this year. So all those numbers, levy dollars, and projects, equipment purchases that you have seen previously are reflected in this management plan. Just wanted to point out as well that at the time that this was put together, Christina and myself had not sat down with the department heads yet to review the 2025 preliminary budget with department heads. So there will be some minor changes from what you see tonight to what's presented at the August 19th meeting. I just wanted to make you aware that we're making any changes from those discussions, reflect that in the financial management plan and bring that back to you on the 19th. But this is really to get, to Bruce's point, a really key part in what S&P like to see with that bond rating. It shows good financial planning and budgeting for the future. So really, I'll turn it over to Bruce, but really what we're looking for from council tonight is any questions they have for Bruce or city staff ourselves for what they have questions on in the financial management plan, but also if you have any questions or changes that you would like staff to bring forward at that August 19th work session for the 2025 preliminary budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bruce.
Great, thank you again. So I'll be referring to the PowerPoint that's up on your screens as well as the memo that I believe was in your council packets. And some of you have already heard some of this introductory information about the FMP, so I won't go into a great amount of detail on it. But essentially what we're trying to do with an FMP, as Kevin alluded to, is bring together projections for your operating budget and all of your key levy-supported funds, and also your capital budget, again, in those same levy-supported funds, so that we have a really clear understanding of the overall affordability of the game plan, if you will, and what changes to city policy, city budgeting practices, et cetera, might be necessary to make things happen, make the priorities of the council happen as you anticipate them. So it's really meant to be a living document. This is not a recommendation. This is not, set in stone. We would really expect that Kevin and Christina would continue to work with this and to test assumptions, have us make updates as appropriate. But it's really meant to be a high-level planning tool that has value on its own, but then also can inform the annual budgeting process going forward. So it's something that we've had a lot of success with in terms of helping clients see where there might be pitfalls, but on the converse side, where also you have the financial wherewithal to get things done for the community. And sometimes without a tool like this, it can be hard to know, right? Well, gee, what are the trade-offs, or can we really afford to do this without spiking the property tax levy or draining fund balances, et cetera? So that's really the point of this FMP, and I'll just give you a little bit of detail on our findings, the work we did, and the findings of this update. So Kevin, if we can go to the next slide.
You should have a...
Oh, that's right, you told me that. Okay. So I already talked about a lot of the key elements of the financial management plan. Another thing that I want to note is we do project the city's tax base as part of this as well. We've tried to be very conservative here. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. By conservative, I mean not assuming huge dynamic growth year after year after year, but assuming something that is steady and stable and that we think is probably less growth than will actually occur in Forest Lake, but gives you, again, the confidence as the decision makers that we're not expecting a wildly crazy and robust growth cycle to keep continuing over the next 10 years. We also talk about debt service or we project debt service in this model as well. So as you know, in the CIP that was approved a couple of weeks ago, there are projects that are assumed to be cash financed and other projects that are assumed to be debt financed. We have all of your existing debt in the model, but then we also layer in projected debt service for these new projects and what the debt levies would have to be. So we're looking at levies both for operating and for capital cash contributions or cash investments, and then for debt service as well. Clearly, these decisions on whether to use cash or to use debt are up to you. Ultimately, you get to decide when it's actually time to take on these projects. But we've, again, used the assumptions in the CIP, and just sort of jumping ahead, what you can see, or what you will see, is that the city, all things being equal, does have the capacity to take on the CIP without any drastic impacts on your finances or your taxes. The bottom line here, I just want to note, because there's a lot of inputs, a lot of assumptions, but we always look to the property tax impact and the fund balance impact. And if the property tax impact looks like it's getting out of line, or if the fund balances start really tanking, then we know, okay, it's time to change some assumptions. Either looking at the list of projects, are there certain projects that aren't as much of a priority or could be deferred, or are there other things that the city could do to mitigate some of those negative impacts? That's really what we're looking at, is both the tax impact and the fund balances, and making sure that both stay within reasonable ranges. So I won't go over this slide too much. We did take the last FMP that we did with the city back in 2021, have incorporated information from your 23 audit, your 24 budget, and some preliminary numbers for your 25 budget, and then also took into account the CIP and the city's staffing projections for the next 10 years. One thing I really want to note, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, is you might have noticed the staffing projections really starting to add up and having a cumulative impact on the budget. But it's really clear from talking with staff that they understand that a lot of these staffing changes would be contingent on continued growth, right? So we're forecasting, we're projecting out what these needs might be, what the financial impacts would be. But if the city of Forest Lake's growth does slow down quite a bit for whatever reason, you as a governing body, of course, would have the decisions to make as to whether and how to actually make all those staffing additions. So I think with that, I will jump into a few of the specific highlights from the model, just noting again that we are looking for your feedback, as Kevin noted, and any changes that you'd like to see before you really get into the meat of your 2025 budget process. Okay, so a lot of these findings are comparable to the ones in the short memo that I had in your board packet or your council packet. The first thing I wanted to point out, if you've seen the actual projection here, the general tax levy is really calculated to produce a balanced budget. And that's the only essentially line in the model that goes wherever it needs to go in order to get to a balance. So all the other assumptions on non-levy revenues, all the other assumptions on operating expenditures, those drive what happens in that general fund levy line, okay, in line 4 on the model. So I want you to just know that that's not, again, set in stone, but is really a function of the model to say, all things as shown, what does the levy need to be to get to a balanced budget? The staffing additions in line 15, I already mentioned those a little bit. Again, those are projections, and I think they make sense based on the past history of the city. But again, those would be subject to future decisions and possible changes, either possibly accelerating them, possibly deferring them, or some other set of changes. Moving on to line 20, This is a contingency, and it kind of the result of a good discussion that Christina, Kevin, and I had, in that even though the model shows what the levy needs to be in order to hold a break-even budget, as the budget grows, your existing fund balance, while it's really significant and in a good place, that existing fund balance would become a smaller percentage of the next year's expenses, right? Because it's a flat dollar amount, your expenses are growing, and therefore it's not going to stay at or around 50% of your expenditures, which is the city's policy. So we actually added in this line 20, this contingency, to estimate, okay, it's a placeholder, admittedly, but what kind of additional more funding needs to go into the general fund reserve in order to stay at or around that 50% mark. And we're not quite on 50%. I wanted to just sort of show it more as an illustration, but you can see that the city will need to think about how to keep your fund balance at an appropriate level, both in dollars as well as a percentage of the budget. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. All right. Moving on to a few other key inputs. On line 29, this is the estimated levy for the bonds that you just awarded on the previous agenda item. I wanted to just note that we've got that included. We'll update that with the actual results. It won't be $310,000. It'll be less than that, even at 105% of the debt amount. But that is there along with the YMCA debt, the city center refunding, and the road bonds that we worked with you on back in 2019. I should also note that a lot of your debt falls off rather quickly once we get past 2033. So, this model has its pros and cons. Things start to get kind of fuzzy after 10 years, actually probably get a little fuzzy after about 5 years. But just know, and we can give further information on this, that a lot of your existing debt falls off in the early to mid 2030s, which will free up capacity to do whatever a future council wants to do in that regard. Okay. I did include then also special tax levies for economic development, capital equipment replacement, capital improvement, parks dedication, and the building maintenance fund. I want to make clear that each one of these funds has its own page that's part of this model that projects the revenues and expenses, including these levies, okay? So in the future, city staff can look at all of the assumptions that then feed into the summary page. But as you can see, we're not showing a lot of growth in these levies, just more sort of flat amounts that, along with other revenues, are sufficient to pay all of the cash-funded projects that are in the city's CIP. That's what this is really about, is tying back to those projects that aren't going to be bonded or that city staff didn't think made sense to bond, and what is the kind of levy that will be necessary to pay for those projects as estimated and when estimated. So all of those roll up, as you can see. Well, let me break this down a little bit more. So we did include then the existing tax levies. That would be the operating tax levy, the debt levies, and the special tax levies. All of those add up into line 36. And then for the bond financed capital projects on the next line, that's where we projected out what the debt service would be for those projects if you did decide to do them as scheduled and issue bonds for them. Okay, so that's new debt service levies for those projects that are bond financed. And then I won't get into the minutia of the fiscal disparities distribution, but you can then see that we have a net levy to taxpayers projected on line 39. And I'm sure this is of interest to you all. The estimated levy increases, again, caveats abound here, right? But you can see that for 2025, we are projecting about a 13% increase in the levy, and I understand that that is underneath the target that has been set, at least preliminarily. So we seem to be in a good place. Obviously, a lot more work to be done that you'll all be doing in setting your 2025 budget, but nothing about the city's operating plans or capital plans led the model to say, you need to raise your levy by 25%. So that's a good thing. And then you can see for future years, there are, it sort of bops around a little bit in terms of the levy increases. And of course, each year the city will be updating this plan, right? And you'll be putting in actual information from 2024. You'll have your 25 budget and then 26 budget. And so hopefully over time, as you work the plan, so to speak, this will just keep getting better and better with more precise information. So then the last thing I just wanted to note are the tax rates and the tax impacts. So what we did as it relates to the tax base is we assumed 3% growth per year on existing values. So for all of your homes, we're assuming that those values increase by 3% per year on an inflationary perspective. And then we also assume that the city's tax base will grow by 1% per year due to new development, new residential development primarily. So altogether, we're looking at about a 4% per year growth in the city's tax rate, or excuse me, tax base. We aren't assuming any growth or any new development in commercial industrial. And we know that that's a very conservative assumption because you are having commercial, you are having industrial growth in the city. But because that is so lumpy and hard to predict, we didn't want, again, this model to be overly optimistic in terms of the tax-based growth that would come on the CI side of things, and really wanted to focus on residential and what's realistic to assume for residential growth. So given that, when we take, you can see how we've inflated the tax base, the tax capacity of the city. And then when we divide the projected levy by the projected tax base, we of course get the tax rate projection. And that tax rate is on line 45. So you can see again that we stay in a relatively stable upward pattern, no huge increases, but that essentially over this projection, if you were again to do all of the capital projects as projected and when projected, you could see that your rate might increase from roughly 40% up to 50-some% over a 10-year period. But that's again really caveated because we would expect your tax base to grow by more than 4% per year. And of course, you'll be making budget decisions each and every year, right? So if you do see modest growth, then you get to adjust operating budget assumptions and capital budget assumptions, which will then bring down that tax rate impact. So I don't want anyone, basically I don't want anyone leaving here saying the city's tax rate is going to go up to 50-some%. That's a projection given all of these assumptions, but there's a lot of decision-making along the way that will adjust the actual outcomes. So I think that's most of what I had. Just, I guess in conclusion, this is a big step forward for the city, and I want to give credit to both Christina and Kevin for moving this forward. Having your CIP was a massive undertaking to complete, but also provided great information. And both that CIP and this FMP, I think, will help the council not have to reinvent wheels each year, right? You've got a plan. Obviously, plans are subject to change. You get to decide how they change. But in terms of keeping track of the city's priorities and what you want to do and when, you've got that written down now. And you can really work from this model, this document, in moving the city forward. So I think that's really exciting, as well as, again, the benefit with S&P. And I think they'll be very excited to see where this lands, as well as the city's actual budgets for future years. So why don't I stop there and ask what questions you might have?
Council, let's just open it up. What questions might we have?
So am I
Councilmember
understanding
Erickson?
correctly that we're anticipating a 1% growth rate? How does that compare to our last 5 years in terms of residential growth?
So I don't know that we did an analysis. I think this is what Ellers had used the last time they did it, and we just stuck with that. Is that right, Bruce,
that's
how we
right.
landed there? So,
Yeah, personally, I'd love to see this with a little bit more context.
Sure. Yep.
Because watching our tax rate go from mid-30s to mid-50s makes me a little sick to my stomach. And thinking about double-digit tax levy increases throughout the next 5 years, that's a lot.
one thing on a couple slides back, Bruce, sorry if I, Mayor, if I
Yeah, go ahead, please.
we didn't talk about this, and I'm sorry I missed it, but the TIF district that's expiring in 2027.
Right.
And the fact that we didn't include that in here, that would increase your existing tax base then, starting in 28?
Correct.
And so I think maybe we could
Actually, I'm
go
sorry,
back and
it's
do some-
actually in 27.
Oh, in 27?
Yeah.
So I think we might need to do a little bit more work. I'm sorry, Kevin and Bruce, that I missed that earlier, but that's, all that money that's being paid into that TIF now gets to come to your general fund, and so that might help with at least that 28 big increase. So again, this was a starting point, but we can certainly continue to look at that. I will say that too, again, that it's common that you don't use commercial projections in these, just because they're so much more difficult to predict, whereas you kind of know you've got plats for housing coming along, and they might come along. And so for that reason, that is why it's conservative, but certainly if council feels like a different percentage numbers, or you want us to pull, some actual residential numbers to base this off of, or what we had asked Abby to do is to kind of look out, we know what your comp plan says for how many people and units you're supposed to add over the next, till 2040, this only goes till 2033, split it out, how do you think that's gonna happen? And I think the number was pretty close to 1%, so that's kind of why we evened it out. So in some respects, there was a little methodology behind it, I guess. It wasn't it didn't exactly line up, but also do recognize that it's conservative. But of course, if council wants us to throw something more in there, where, that's exactly the kind of feedback we'd like to hear tonight.
Yeah, I guess at least for, argument's sake, know what it's been for the last 5 years. We've obviously added a lot of multifamily. There's more coming. We've got some great developments on the horizon. If is that 1%, then it is what it is. But I'd just be curious.
And so multifamily, normally we sometimes kind of put that in commercial. That's the other
Really?
reason it's not included. Yep, they get typically taxed at a commercial rate unless they're subsidized housing or something like that. So I know it sounds weird, but it doesn't fall into the residential bucket usually from a tax perspective.
Councilmember Erickson, I did want to point out on this slide, this is overall tax base growth, but in the last 3 years, your tax base has increased by 6%, 24%, and 8%. So quite a bit more than the 4% average. And one of the nice things, Mayor and Council, about this model is that while we're really fond of it, it's basically a glorified Excel workbook, and you can test lots of different assumptions. So our base case might stay at 4% for planning purposes, but then we could see, okay, what if we assumed 6% average annual growth or 8% average annual growth, and what would that do to the tax rate projection? That might help with some of your heartburn, knowing that most likely the rate impacts are going to be less than what we're projecting here.
Yeah, I just remember we had a lot of hard conversations last year when we settled on 14, and they saw that the projections for the next couple of years are double digits. So I think we just need to be really mindful of that.
Right. I think we do need to also just recognize the milestone that now we can quantify the heartburn. This is the first time that we've had both the expense side and the revenue side all pulled together. So to see how this plays out over 10 years, we've been operating blind for many years and not knowing what that projection is and how all of these pieces fit together. So at least we have some quantification, which drives decision and all of the good stuff. So I share your concern on that trajectory. And, at some point, future iterations of this, I like the idea of showing a couple of different scenarios, and we might always be planning towards that baseline as a bad day scenario, or as a not wonderful, less than wonderful, but to see, a number of different scenarios, also just so that there's some visibility that we are managing to that. If nothing else, just helps the, kind of the perception of, it's not the plan necessarily that we're at 53%. It would,
Right.
you know, we would be making adjustments along the way.
Absolutely. And I don't think you all, as the governing body, can say that enough. It's like,
Right.
this is a really good tool, but it's not a budget.
Right.
And hopefully it's a little bit better than Apple weather on our iPhones, because that seems to be completely wrong all the time. But, you know, it's definitely based on a set of assumptions.
And the other thing jumps out at me is the opportunity over time to smooth some of the ups and downs. You notice in year 2033, we're at a, 1.7%. Over time, there's some opportunity to maybe help, shuffle and smooth that out a little bit, so it's just not so drastic. But personally, I cringe a little when I see the double-digit increases, but we've also been talking about, the initial preliminary, last year came in at 20%, right? And we didn't
right.
pass that, but to start to see, because of the revenue impact, that these numbers are now less than 15%. There's some progress from some of the previous projections we had seen, and this just gives us kind of the tools that we need to kind of refine further what's needed when.
Yep.
So I see a lot of positivity in just having this level of planning done, so well done to
Absolutely.
everyone that put it together.
Great. The last thing I would like to just note is that I'll be working with Christina and Kevin to make any updates to this fall, once you do lock in your 25 budget. And then we will be most likely here working with you next spring on the financing of the North Shore Trail, right? Reconstruction project, which I know has been a priority for the city for a while. I recall discussions about it pre-pandemic, I think. So anyways, that's all, to come, but I look forward to future discussions.
I did have one small question just around the mechanics of assumptions. What do we have built into that intergovernmental line? What is, I see a comment every year, it's about $500,000. Is that assuming, what is that assuming? Is that bonding funds? Is it, what, recurring sources of revenue? What is that, what does that look like?
Mayor and City Council, Mayor Bain, are you, just to be clear, are you referring to line, I lost it here for a minute.
Is it line 7?
Line 7?
Yeah.
That is intergovernmental revenue related specifically to the general fund. My recollection is there's a lot of police state aid.
Okay.
And then there's a fire state aid pass-through that we pass through as well that's in there, and that makes up the majority of that line item. The city is receiving a little bit over 50,000 of LGA this year, but that is going away for 25. So that's in that line item, but that makes up the majority, as long as some other state grants and funding that mostly from the police and fire submit for reimbursement.
So we're very comfortable, assuming we should knock on some wood, right? Assuming that is recurring revenue, and so anything that we would request in the future and be awarded for state bonding funds is just an additional add,
It's
right?
above and
Unplanned
beyond,
add?
yep.
Okay.
Correct.
Correct.
Councilmember Roberts?
So as much as I appreciate the kind of worst-case scenario,
Yeah.
for budgeting purposes, if going forward, if we can talk, my understanding is multifamily apartments is some of our most valuable taxable properties. And so if we can try to include that in here, so we, to Councilmember Erickson's point about getting a real number, it gives a little less angst on making these decisions and a more of a true number of what those percentages could be.
But do you have a strong feeling you can predict the number and size and value of the multifamily that you think is coming in the future? The existing stuff is in here. It's the future stuff that is missing, right? And that's sometimes hard to predict. Again, open to it if the council can land on a number that you can agree to, but that's why we didn't include it. Because there's just so many variables right in that, right? Because it's about their value. You can take your median home value, which is what we did, and estimate how many new, single-family homes, townhomes even you can roll in there, but it's just a little harder for apartments.
But there has to be something there. There has to be at a low and some kind of a number just to factor it in, because it is our most valuable taxable property.
What do we have for, in our comp plan? Because, I mean, we have certain, you know,
Sure.
density requirements.
requirements.
So, I mean, is there some assumptions built into that that would be
We could look at that.
reasonable? I mean, there's a lot of assumptions. I mean, the fact that there's no inflation on some of these numbers 7 years out gives me heartburn as well. But we know that it's gonna change, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we can rest assured that there'll be more multifamily coming to town when that sequencing happens. Well, let's get the interest rates down first and make them affordable to build again, but they'll come.
Yeah, and there is supposed to be inflation. I've noticed as we sat here too, that some of the lines didn't, and we'll follow up on that. So I just wanna also, it's gonna sound just like what I told you when we did the CIP. Really, we call it a plan, but it's really a tool, and really focus on next year, right? I promise you, even when Kevin brings it back in August, it's gonna look different, because each time you get more information, you're gonna change it. We'll, have some updated stuff, even just from the smaller bond today and
Right.
whatnot. So it's good to do the long-range planning, but I would just encourage you to not get too hung up that you're making decisions to harm today because of something that may or may not happen in the future.
Locking in on it.
All right.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you for being
All right.
here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good night.
All right, our next item this evening is item 7E, which is consideration of our contract for median options. And Dave?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It was a council priority for upcoming budgets to look at the landscaping along the medians on Lake Street, Broadway, and the two roundabouts at 97 and 61. The current 10-year CIP holds $725,000 for that project. Part of it, or $375,000 in '25, and another $350,000 in '26. During this discussion, staff has kind of relayed messages that it's difficult to maintain what we have, and the reason why we kind of need to redo it all, but also discussion of maybe there's other options to fill in these areas of landscape, whether it's maybe you just need to put concrete in one because it serves no purpose, or maybe you need to turf some out that gets mowed, or add trees instead of plantings. That's a tough task and way above my level of expertise, and Administrator Hant had recommended a company that had done this for Lake Elmo, and it was a developer that needed to do some landscaping in some of their medians. So reached out to Lucius and had him put together a proposal for the city to look at all of these little pockets of landscaping along Broadway and Lake and the two roundabouts, go through a very thorough process involving the city council at about 3 workshops, including a final design sketch at the end. As you can see, I attached the proposal. It's a pretty well thought out process. I think it'll generate, like he spells out, you'll get 4 ideas at the beginning, narrow that down to 2, and then narrow down your final. So it gives staff and council a lot of input to be able to kind of figure out what's going to look nice, but also set itself up for success long-term for maintenance. So the bid came in at, well, higher than this, but Christina beat him up a little bit and got him to lower the price. But it came in at a little over $12,000, which is under 2% of what we're proposing the total project to be. I think by doing this exercise, we are probably going to realize that savings back, maybe, and then some, just by the modifications we make. I think it's a very good proposal. I think it'll set up that how we want it set up. And at the end of this, we can choose to stick with this company to do final plans and go through the whole bid process and do the inspections and all that, or we can take these final designs and do what we want with them. So that's my spiel. If you guys got any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thanks, Dave. Questions for Dave? Comments?
Just one thing I'd like to add to it. The August workshop is all budget. It's Kevin's time to shine. And then the thought would be the next 3 workshops, so September, October, and November, where we slide these workshops in. So that final design would come in November. You know, if that would work for council, we'd just work with Lucius to get him scheduled for those 3 workshops, and it would give us a little over a month or so to get that first task done, where he meets with public works staff, and if council members are interested to do these walkarounds and other community people, so we can have that time to coordinate and find time to get all that done for that first workshop.
Thank you. I appreciate this kind of coming forward in this manner. I think it's wise that we're considering long-term design, and also long-term, what are the design elements we want, and then what is the maintenance that's needed. It's not the approach that when these projects went in initially that we took, and we've kind of seen that, and we're at the end of those, useful life of that landscaping. So and we also know that this next phase is quite expensive, so let's get it right for the long term. I think the upfront planning and us all having the opportunity to visualize what that's going to look like and provide input along the way. I suspect, as Dave suggests, that we may find that our ultimate project might come down in cost, and certainly we'll have a lot more opportunities for some public input along the way. So I don't know why we wouldn't do this, but happy to entertain any thoughts anyone else might have. Any comments? Maybe ready for a motion if anyone's ready?
Make a motion to approve contract with Midwest Wetland Improvements in the amount not to exceed $12,346.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. All right. Moving on to our next discussion item is item 7F, which is consideration of our city administrator recruitment proposals. And Amanda.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, Council, if you recall, on the July 1st special meeting, you directed me to find additional recruitment firms to present proposals for a new city administrator search. If you recall, there was 2 things that Council really wanted the search firms to focus on. The first being helping Council to build out a much more robust profile for what the city is looking for in terms of a city administrator. So creating, I think we use the term avatar for what the city administrator will look like. And then the second piece is to focus on a much more targeted recruitment procedure. So one that would utilize picking up the phone and calling individuals who are currently employed as a city manager, city administrator, or in some level of city administration, who meet that avatar profile. And see what can be found for, in particular, potential candidates in the metro area or statewide, or even a little bit outside of the state, that would have more relevant experience in cities of this size, or slightly smaller, that are looking for that next step up in position. We did receive 3 proposals. We received a proposal from Express Employment Professionals, GMP Consultants, and GovHR, and all 3 were invited to present this evening. I believe 2 of the 3 are in the audience right now. I believe both Express Employment Professionals and GMP Consultants are here. I did speak with Charlene from GovHR. They presented the first time we did this back in January or February, whenever that was. And so they had some scheduling conflicts and were not able to attend tonight. But she said that the presentation that she would give tonight would be generally similar to what she gave the last time. So I will turn it over to Carl if you want to come up. And he's with Express Employment Professionals. He can chat a little bit about his process and answer any of council's questions. I'll turn it over to you, Carl.
Sure, thank you. And is the presentation going to be on the screen? I have it here too, if that works.
No, it should be in council's packets, right?
Okay.
I don't think we're.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for having me back. I was here virtually last time, and I'll try to run through this relatively quickly. Most of the information here is the same as it was the prior time. A couple things I'd like to highlight up front is that our firm, we're embedded in the community. I can look out the window and see my office and where it's been for the last 10 years here, just about 10 years. We also, as Amanda had said, we take a very serious approach up front at building a profile, what we call a discovery profile, basically an avatar, and asking lots of questions to really refine what it is that the city is looking for in that candidate. And our team, we're true headhunters. We use data tools to go out and find contact information, use that avatar that we've created to narrow down a list, and then we pick up the phone, we call those people. We use about 15 different data tools to do that. And lastly, our team, we're part of a franchise organization, over 800 different locations across North America. Our team in Stillwater, that all they do down there is professional headhunting, where our office here does more of your production labor, that sort of thing. They were #1 in our company last year, the #1 revenue generating professional search office out of over 800 locations for our company. Just a few kind of highlights I wanted to touch on before I get started. So briefly, a little bit about our company. Express Employment was founded in 1983, headquartered out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. There's over 850 locations in 5 countries. That includes all 50 states in the U.S., all the Canadian provinces as well. Last year we had over 79,000 client organizations, companies that we served as a company. That was in 2022 when these numbers were pulled. And our specialized recruiting group, that's the name of our team in Stillwater. That's a subsidiary of Express Employment. As I mentioned, all they do there is professional search, so more geared towards city administrators, those types of roles. Let's see, the next slide, we succeed by helping others succeed. So as I mentioned, we're very much community oriented. I sit on 2 different volunteer boards here in the city of Forest Lake, the Forest Lake Chamber and the Forest Lake Area Community Scholarship Foundation as well. And I grew up not too far from here in Shoreview, Minnesota, went through Mounds View High School and played against Forest Lake and lots of sports growing up. So we're very much community people here. Our team in Stillwater, just a little history there. So our franchise group, a friend of mine from college, his dad opened his first Express office in 1991, and that's our Red Wing location, and we've slowly expanded from there organically over time as we've grown and had some successes along the way and been able to organically grow. So we expanded into River Falls in 1999. Of course, I was still in high school at that time. This was before my time, but St. Croix Falls, that's when I started in 2013 with the company. We opened Forest Lake in 2015. And then in 2020, actually a football friend of my brother's growing up, also from the Shoreview area, he joined our team and had a track record of leading successful organizations. He's the president of a decent-sized software company located here in Minnesota. Left there, came and joined our team, and has helped us grow into the #1 revenue search team in all of Express. As far as the types of roles that we fill, in 2023, our company filled 37,515 administrative roles that were keyed into our computer system, is where this data comes from. Over 11,000 human resources positions, 4,600 engineering and technical positions, 17,000 accounting and finance related administrative positions, almost 32,000 clerical positions, just to give you an idea of the type of work that we do. Going into a little bit about our process. So initial discussion, so that's, as Amanda alluded to, really understanding, sitting down with your hiring team. Usually that's an hour to 2 hour long conversation, depending on how much information we have up front as far as job description and those things, but really getting to understand the organization's culture, the environment, the types of cities, size of city, types of scope of projects that they've done in the past, of the type of candidate that you would like to fill this role. From there, we move forward with candidate search. We have about 15 different database tools. Some of the big ones, obviously we use Indeed. All of our recruiters have LinkedIn recruiter search packages, which are expensive search tools for recruiters to use. We also use a data tool called ZoomInfo. That's how we contact passive candidates who aren't on Indeed. They're not on LinkedIn, but might be looking for the right opportunity if it presents itself. So we're picking up the phone and dialing for dollars, as we say. From there, we're doing a vetting process through our own interview process, trying to match based on the skills that you're looking for, the technical skills, the cultural piece, all of that. Trying to find that right candidate, narrow it down to typically, in an ideal world, 3 to 5 candidates that we can then present to the city, where you make a determination on who you'd like to interview yourselves. From there, we do reference checks, more vetting. We can mix and match different skills testing, whatever it is that you're looking for, personality tests, all that kind of stuff. And then hopefully by the end of the process, and I've kind of outlined a timeline on that, but by the end of about 2 months, we should have a candidate ready for you to hire, and then we're skilled in negotiating through that process as well, and kind of walking through that hiring and onboarding process. The details make the difference, so we're very much SOP focused. All of our different processes have SOPs that go along with them, and that's really what drives our search process. So we're very focused on details, trying to find, spend that extra time. I had a company that we work with a few weeks ago said I was the only company that showed up and went on a tour with them out of the 5 companies that they contacted to work with this manufacturing facility. That just, that's important to us, that we go out and we see the environment, we really get to know the type of person that you're looking for, the environment that they're going into, all of that, and we focus on those details to make sure that hopefully the outcome is what you're desiring. The next process there is kind of outlined on the following page too, as far as the search project timetable. So developing those specific specifications that you're looking for, researching and sourcing, and a lot of the dates that are on here are going to be somewhat driven by the city and how fast you're looking to move. Some of it's dictated, especially once we get to actually searching for the candidate. That's probably a couple week-long process to really get the level of messages out, the phone calls, follow-up emails, all those things. That's kind of the bulk of the timeline here. But as far as the rest of it, it's kind of dictated by the city as far as how fast you want to move through this. But developing the search specifications, understanding who that candidate is, research and sourcing those candidates through some of the tools and things that I mentioned before, following up repeatedly, oftentimes with those candidates that really fit that ideal avatar. And then from there, it's submitting candidates. Typically, as far as the hiring team goes, everyone gets an email with a resume, information about the candidate, why we feel like they're a good fit. Hopefully you're getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 of those, and then narrowing it down to the list that you want to interview. Then from there, moving forward to second interviews, final interviews, then determining as far as negotiating compensation package and the onboarding strategy from there. And then after they start, we check in with whoever you determine is kind of the hiring manager there, and then also with the candidate as time goes on to ensure that it's an ongoing good fit, and they're happy, you're happy, all that kind of thing. The following page has some client testimonials for our office. The first one there, I won't read the whole thing, but that's from Don Wortham, who's the General Government Director of Polk County. He had Mark Gilker in our office, ran a search for him, and oftentimes we have one person that's assigned to a particular search, but it's multiple recruiters who are working on it at any given time, and he had great things to say as far as he had a disappointing first search and then contacted our group, and we successfully filled the position. The second one there, that's from a gal who actually lives right here in the Forest Lake area. She's the HR manager for a manufacturing company called Calspan. But just talking about how nice it was to work with Casey on our team. Moving on towards the end here, so we offer a guarantee of 2 years, what the city had requested. If that initial candidate that we place does fall through for whatever reason, whether it's performance related on their side, or city terminates the person, or they leave voluntarily, any of those reasons, then you can either elect to have a replacement candidate or 100% refund. I should also mention that we're 100% contingency based. So you don't pay us a dime unless we find you the candidate that you feel is going to be a good fit. And that means that if you have a dark horse candidate that comes in and applies on their own in the meantime, and you decide to take that person through your process and hire them, that's no sweat off our back. I mean, we do lots of searches that unfortunately don't bear any fruit for us, and that's just part of the business that we're in, and we don't mind that. We're contingency based, no retainers up front. So the fee that outlined there, $29,500. Typically, I mean, we're a little flexible with the billing, but normally once the person's placed, then we like to have payment within 10 days. And then that, as I mentioned, there's a guarantee built in for 2 years there. And then the quality piece, As I mentioned, we like to check in with the candidate as well as the organization, make sure that you guys are happy with what you've seen and gain your feedback to understand how we can better improve our service. So in closing, I'd really like the opportunity to work with the city on this, and I think we can help you find that next city administrator that will help continue growing the city and everything, all the nice things that you do here. So with that, I'm open to any kinds of questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Council, what questions might we have for Mr. Amley?
If we did have that dark horse candidate come through, would you be available to do any vetting if we're as an organization are able to do that? Do you see that as an opportunity?
Yes, we can do that, and that'd be probably a different conversation as far as like the fee structure and things like that, but be more than happy to do that, council member.
All right, thank you.
You were kind enough in our last search to be available, and we're, I think, set in place to do an additional background check and reference check on a candidate that we were wanting some additional information on. That, as you think about the scope of services, is that the level of, would that be included for a number of finalist candidates if we wanted to include that level? I can ask that question specific to you because we kind of agreed on what that would look like, and
yes.
Just want some assurance on, does that fit? Is that an extra component on top of what would be your standard process? What are your thoughts?
That does fit, and you might have noticed that the number changed on our fee, and part of that was most of our search and placement are the end client, the company is doing that actual final vetting and onboarding. Okay. We're not the employer of record, so oftentimes we don't do that. However, we were able to have our attorney draft up some documents and enable us to do that, and so that's part of the reason the fee changes, because I do expect that that'll be part of our process this time.
Most of your clients don't have the public data requirements that we have, and so we would prefer that is something that you do on our behalf, and then also you're able to provide a single lens to all 5 of us of that information that you would provide, which is also probably a different process than what happens in the public sector. So we would like to, I think, I can speak to myself, I would find that to be very important. And then also, because we are in the public sector, can you just describe what level of online search reputation, like what does that look like of information that you might bring back to us as far as, newspaper articles of past employment, or how does that fit, and how would you get that information to us?
Sure, so typically we start, like our references, we're contacting past employers, past coworkers, that sort of thing, occasionally personal references, but vast majority of the time, those aren't going to really tell you what you need to know. We do some searching around, I would say. We don't have like a standard procedure as far as, I know a lot of our customers, they go on people's Facebook pages and things and check, and we've been told not to do that, so we don't do a lot of that. But as far as public record search and things, we can do that, and we do regularly conduct background checks on behalf of our clients and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does, and I think what we would be looking for is more of what is the publicly available, what does the 30-minute Google search bring back as far as topics of note? I think we would find it incredibly helpful to have that be summarized and provided to us.
Sure.
In absence of that, we end up each doing our own, and we will probably likely still do some of that on our own, but to have that foundation of information that's done and provided to us would be helpful. And then through that, I'm interested in how your recommendations come through the process. Are you, as you're gathering information and starting to form some professional opinions, how is that expressed to us, and what is that kind of the professional side of the service shine through?
Mm-hmm. I would say, I mentioned that kind of after we recruit, source our candidates, we're typically we present with an email, and this can all be customized to what you're looking for, so this is just kind of standard operating procedure, but we'll send an email that has all the hiring managers copied on it. It has their resume, and then what we call a write-up, and that's typically probably 4 to 5 paragraphs explaining some more information that's maybe not in the resume. Yeah. Talks about their salary expectations, all those kinds of conversations that we have up front that, like I said, don't show up in your typical resume. And then, so some of that information will come through there. You know, here's where we feel this person is a little bit weak versus the job description that you're looking for. Here's where we feel that they're very strong. Past that, I mean, a lot of times we're picking up the phone and having those more kind of candid conversations. But ultimately, you know, especially with a 2-year guarantee, that's a long guarantee. It doesn't do us any good to try to ram a square peg into a round hole and give you the wrong candidate who's going to turn over 2 months later. We're just going to end up doing more work in the long run. So we're very focused on, you know, trying to find you that right person the first time around. And 2 of my favorite questions in our kind of what we call our discovery profile, learning who you're looking for. What makes this an attractive position? What makes this an attractive place to work? And the flip side, what makes this an unattractive position potentially? What makes it potentially an unattractive place to work? So we're trying to talk the wrong candidates out of wasting your time, wasting our time, but we're trying to talk the right candidates into, hey, take a look at this. It might be worth an opportunity to go out and interview.
Thank you. Council, I don't mean to hog the mic here. Other questions that you might have? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, second, we have Greg with GMP. He, for your packet, his presentation starts, shoot, it just froze. Starts on page 183. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Greg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and staff. I'm not Greg. I'm Jeff Weldon.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
You're right.
I'm Jeff Weldon. I'm a senior consultant with GMP. Greg Prothman owns the company, and he's based on our company headquarters out in Seattle. I head up the Minnesota operation. My home office is in Sauk Center, so I'm only 2 hours away, and I'd be heading up to the operation here, and I'd be your lead consultant with the assistance of Bob Larson, who is also in the Washington State area. I don't have a formal presentation, and I did not want to waste your time with any more information than you already have in your packet from our proposal. So I think our proposal speaks for itself, so I didn't want to take any more time to do that. But what I'd rather do is just leave you with 4 crucial points tonight that I think are key takeaways that I want to really impress upon you. And then I'd be happy to stand for any questions. And the first is that the avatar profile that we've been talking about and that I know you're very concerned about, we think that is a key foundational part of our company's approach. There's nothing more important than getting a good base of knowledge, good base of familiarization with this community and what you expect from your next city administrator. So as a result, we spend at least 2 days in consecutive interviews here, meeting with you privately and your staff and any other community stakeholders that you deem important for us that would help us get more information about the organization, the community, the culture. We ask a lot of questions. We want to make sure that we can identify candidates that properly align with the specifics of this community and this position and what you want. So we make sure that the candidates we're finding are going to implement your agenda and not their agenda. So again, a key part of that is those stakeholder informational meetings up front. The second key point about that is the robust recruitment effort. We use a lot of the same platforms that most companies use when we advertise and market in an effort to try to attract candidates, but we also pick up the phone relentlessly and we make those calls. I've got service of 29 years in both Minnesota and South Dakota. I worked for the Minnesota legislature before getting into local government, and I've got a lot of contacts around these 2 states. And we pick up the phone and we relentlessly identify people that we think would be a good fit for that community profile that we've been working on and make every effort to try to recruit them to look for new opportunities here in Forest Lake. What's significant about this point is not that there's a lot of people out there who are looking to leave their current position. They may not know it yet. They may be happy in their current position, but once they've been approached with an opportunity for another one, it's been suggested to them, we find that they oftentimes make the very best candidates because they've been approached about the idea of advancing their career in another community for a different type of a challenge. That's happened to me twice in my career, so I can attest to how that to how that works. So we pick up the phone, we make relentless contacts in an effort to try to get them to apply for the position. The third point that I want to make is how we help you facilitate the decision-making process from the applicants and start that narrowing down process. We know that this is very difficult. We get a lot of information from all the candidates. They submit their resume, cover letter, and then we also ask them to respond to a couple of supplemental questions about the position or their experiences. This is an attempt to try to assess their writing skills, so we provide that information to you as well, in addition to the preliminary Google background search and several preliminary background pieces of information for the semifinalist level. What we do is we do online interviews, in-person interviews, if we can, to try to develop a list of semifinalists that we would present to you in a work session. We never try to substitute our judgment for yours, but our job is to help you weed through all of this information to try to narrow down the best candidates as you move toward making that selection of finalists out of that batch. And one of the ways we do that is we help with their numerical system. And we will rate and rank each candidate on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. And we would recommend any candidate that receives a 7 or higher to be considered for advancing to the finalist stage. So that is a way to help quantify all of the data and all the information that we've assembled and put together as a way of recommending that to you. We'll show you the data of all 10 or 12 semifinalists we've reviewed if you want to pick a 6, or your judgment is something other than what we've selected. That's perfectly fine. But we think it's our job to help you in that narrowing down process as we get to that, and that numerical system is a way of doing that. The last thing I want to mention to you is that these things don't always work. Most of the time they do, but there's every once in a while where we'll come up to the finalists and they'll say, this just doesn't work. We don't think we've got the right candidates for the right fit. This candidate does not meet your needs. We don't think they'll be happy here. We offer a guarantee as well, and it's described in our packet, but sometimes we just have to pump the brakes and say, we need to back up, we need to start over. We want to hit the reset button a little bit and figure out what we need to do differently to help get you through this process so you do ultimately get a new city administrator. Like I say, it doesn't happen very often, but we do not force somebody in or encourage somebody just to finish the job and be done. We want to stay with you to make sure that you've got the right fit. This is about long-term relationships, and they are very vital relationships to you and your constituents. So we want to make sure they work. So we stick with you through the process from the very beginning. We have a guarantee as well. It's 18 months on the guarantee, and if this person leaves within the first 18 months, then we will do the search at no cost, only expenses. And if you don't hire anybody out of the process, and we find that there's nobody in that list of finalists that works either from your thoughts or from my recommendation to you, then we will stick with you and we'll do whatever it takes to continue the process for as long as it takes to make sure that you ultimately do get a city administrator that you will be happy with. So again, I didn't have anything formal by way of a presentation, but I did want to just make those a couple of crucial points, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you so much. Council, let's open it up. Any questions that you may have? You, in your presentation, talked about and kind of addressed my question I had to the former candidate on how does your recommendation come through the process? So I appreciate that. As I think about the most important phases, building that avatar is mission critical, but also so is building that first base of candidates. As you may know, we had some frustration over our first base of candidates the last time we went through this process. What do you do if we are together sitting in a room and we're just not happy with the list of semifinalists? Are you open to continuing that kind of casting a broader net and not proceeding into the semifinalist selection? Or what is that, walk me
Oh,
through, what do you do in that
yeah.
scenario? If
Excellent
the pool feels a little weak, what do we
Yeah,
do next?
Excellent question. We go back to the pool and we start over.
Okay.
And we cast a wider net. We look at different places where we could try to find a more fertile ground for candidates maybe. But we do not proceed with any of the candidates unless you're happy with what you see, or you see some basis of the candidates there that is worth proceeding. Some of them are going to fall off, and as a way of narrowing them down, that's going to happen. But we will hit the reset button and go back out to the field. We will re-advertise, reopen it. We'll try to find out why we didn't get a good group of candidates. That's a crucial issue as well, trying to analyze what happened, and what occurred or didn't occur, and say, why didn't we get more candidates applying? We will stick with you in the process, and we will not proceed if you're not satisfied with what you find.
Thank you. And then could you just speak to, as part of your vetting of candidates and selection of candidates, what does your research process look for as far as gathering, publicly available information? What does your process look like to gather that information and then get that information back to us?
Yeah, our firm uses a third party to do all of our background checks, and the stuff we look for, we had described in the proposal. It's education, previous employment, criminal history, all kinds of those types of things. And all those reports come to you in the packet of deliverables. You'll get that information for the semifinalists at the work session when you look at narrowing down the list, and then you'll get a more detailed analysis when you look at the 3 to 5 finalists that you select, or however many you want to select. Then we go into a higher level of detail for the final evaluation.
Okay. Those are my questions. Council, any other questions you would want to add? All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Amanda, any additional thoughts or comments for us?
Thank you, Anna. Yes, so just a reminder, GovHR is not here, but their packet, or their proposal is in your packet as well. It is generally what they provided the first time they did the packet, so not a whole lot has changed there. What I'm looking for from council is a selection of one of these firms, or if you tell me you don't want any of these firms, then I'll go back out and fish again. And if you do want to select one of these firms, to instruct me to enter into an agreement with the chosen firm.
Thank you, Amanda. Council, I look forward to hearing your feedback. What are your thoughts?
Point of order, is it helpful if I ask them to, the two individuals from the different firms, to maybe leave the room for this discussion? They have the right to be here, it's a public meeting, but I don't know if it makes it easier for council to have this conversation if they're not listening.
This will be one of the easier conversations we have
All
together,
right,
so
then.
you're
Very
welcome to
good.
stay. If you'd rather, leave an out of respect for your time, it is almost 9 o'clock. I also respect your time, but you're more than welcome to stay. So.
I'm happy to check out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Council thoughts?
Well, had this conversation before. I was advocating for Carl's company, just because they are local. I like the contingency-based, where I think the other firm, it's 16.5 just to get started, and then plus expenses. So the overall cost, I think, is pretty similar. But the fact that, if we have our own candidate, and I think we've all gotten emails to that effect, we're not on the hook for a dime unless we want to use them to vet those candidates. So, I don't know, in my mind, it's a win-win.
I would just say it's unfortunate that, I didn't realize that Carl's firm worked in the public sector. This testimonial from Polk County says a lot. I know some of us on the council were concerned if we didn't move on our last candidate, that we wouldn't find a good search. This says that another example of it was a failed search. We went back out and we found some good candidates. I think either one of these firms would do a much better job than the previous firm, clearly. I do like Carl's presentation, the local part of it, to Councilmember Erickson's point about if we do have some opportunity that have organically come to us, we're not on the hook. And my suggestion would be go with Carl's firm.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Husnick or Councilmember Valento, any thoughts?
They both had good presentations as far as I'm concerned, but the idea of the more local thing has been tossed around quite a bit, and I would support that also, and go with Carl.
I agree that both presentations were super good. GMPs and GovHR are both on the cheaper side, but I do like that with Carl. It is, I mean, we all know local, but one thing that really I think sets him apart is that from our last experience, he was there for us, and he was willing to go and it was quick, right? Like we were just like, hey, can you help us? And he was just like, of course, I'll do it over the weekend. And so it was crunch time for him, and he was more than happy to help us. And for me, that's just that cherry on top. That it's the energy behind that. I really appreciate.
Yeah. I came in tonight ready to go either direction, either GMP or Carl's firm. And so I think there's good options either way. I also appreciate, he was really willing to jump in and assist on our last search, and just was really a professional in responding to that call. This will be two different approaches, but we have also said that we wanted a more non-traditional approach, and so I think we will get that from Specialized. GMP has a more traditional city administrator recruitment process, and they have those more traditional contacts. I have a little bit of concern with a little bit of a less traditional approach, that they have the ability to get the calls back, but also sometimes that different approach and a fresh perspective has that same effect of getting that call back. So I'm happy to support the move towards Specialized this evening. Again, I think we've got a couple of really good options on the table, and I think the most important one is that we do take action tonight and keep this moving. If we are going to consider some additional, if we're going to consider some candidates that might come to us directly, I do think we should instruct Amanda in her contract to have some level of embedding those into this process so that we don't have multiple tracks that are unorganized or unplanned for. And so, there's a certain amount of, while he may not get the finder's fee component of the agreement, I think we would want him to use the background and to, kind of include that candidate in their interview process. And so maybe there's something different that is done in the fee structures, but something that compensates them for incorporating that candidate into the process. Because what I don't want to do is us end up with 3 different tracks so that we're kind of competing with our own channels. I think we want a coordinated approach, and we need to kind of manage the public's expectations of the process accordingly. I would trust that agreement can be worked out, but I think we should have a common agreement and a common service provider. Thoughts, Amanda, as you hear that, does that seem clear?
Yeah, Your Honor, Counsel, can I ask a clarifying question around that? So if I heard him correctly, it sounded like if we kind of had somebody that was separate, if it's because the city's name has been out there in some of the media around us, retrying the process, I have received some reach out from individuals in the community who are, or the area who are interested in the position and have asked to please, share my information with whomever the recruiter ends up being. So to me, I think the question that I need to confirm with Carl is if I give you the name, but you're just sort of putting them through your whole process, and then that's the name that the council ultimately selects, I'm not sure if we get to say we're not paying you the full amount. I think we probably maybe we get a discount, but I'm not sure that he'll go along with he gets $0.
I wouldn't, and that's what I want to make sure of. I wouldn't
Okay.
expect him to get $0, but I also want him to be motivated to include those candidates that we might, source ourselves or might come to us organically, that he's including those in the process. And
And maybe that's my point of clarification. So ones that have just sort of come organically, obviously I have not reached out to anybody about this position. They just came. I think that might be different than if there is some instruction from council, or if council themselves feel compelled to, I know this person, I want to reach out to them. I think that might be a person that we could say is one of our dark horses, or whatever he called them, versus just, they're just excited for the process. Hey, throw my name in with the recruiter. He would have found them anyways, probably. Is that fair if I sort of negotiate, assuming that that's where you want to go, something along that lines in the negotiations with him? And I'll talk with Carl and figure out what he meant by that.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we want his team to manage the process
Right.
for all candidates. And so really just kind of find out what his expectations for a fee would be if we say, hey, here are 2 people or 3 people that have come to us organically, and take them through your process. What is your expectation for compensation?
Okay. Yep, can do.
And I think maybe we can even say that more positively. The scenario he presented tonight of the dark horse candidate where he gets paid $0, I think we should affirmatively say that's the process we don't want. It could happen,
Understood.
but that is not the preferred process. So let's contractually go into the agreement with eyes wide open to that.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anyone ready for a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we direct Amanda to enter into contract negotiations with Carl, with Specialized Recruiting Group, to find our next city administrator.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further
Can I
discussion?
just say a few
Yes,
words?
please.
I think we're in a better place than we were July 1st here. I know that there's been some question as to why we didn't land on that last candidate, but we are in a better place than we were July 1st. We can't rush to make this decision. It's an important decision to just take the time that we need, and so I'm happy for this decision tonight.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. Thank you, Amanda, for the additional legwork on that. Okay, our next item this evening. Cook us out into our closed session. All right, so our next item this evening, Fenway Field Rehab Project. And Dave, when he's done adjusting temperatures. We just don't want it to be a meat locker again. It's because everyone's sitting on this side of the room.
Mayor and Council, here tonight to talk about the Fenway Field rehabilitation project. There's a lot of words in this memo, but basically, we've talked about this a number of times about the fields needing to be rehabbed at Fenway Fields. Solicited quotes, got low bid from Peterson Companies for $141,420. You can see on their quote that's attached, it's a full rehab of all 4 fields in the quad and Field 5. Pretty thorough work, and also will be lasered, so in the future, we do a rehab project, they can just laser guide all their equipment to get it right back to level again. So that's the one perk of getting that in the future projects, it's not gonna be as much time, and we're also not gonna let it get this far away as well. This is part of that whole $250,000 Fenway improvement project that was in the CIP. Pickleball courts were first, and then this and the last piece is the fence lowering, which is estimated under $20,000. So that'll probably just be quote out to either Midwest or Century Fence to do that work. Original estimates was about $175,000 is what I had first figured for this. It came in at $141,000, so a little bit lower, which is good. I think with all the projects included, will come in about $50,000 under the original funded amount. So having a little extra is always okay. The work would be planned for closing the fields down on Labor Day. So we'll let all the summer sports be done, and then we wouldn't be able to have any fall ball out there. But this would still give us time, if approved tonight, it would give time to coordinate that. And in talking with the school district, no teams have scheduled fall ball games or anything, so it wouldn't be calling people and telling them they have lost field reservations. So this would get blocked out through the rest of the year. There's a lot of sod work on the outfield where the egg line touches the outfield, and infield's on field 5. So it's recommended with all that sod that just really nobody touches it through the rest of the year. Let it go through a freeze thaw, and then it'll be ready for spring of 2025. This has been a long time coming. We've been talking about this since 2020, 2021, so it's finally coming to fruition. And I believe we got a really good contractor. You probably know they've done all the high school fields. They did all those renovations of the track and the softball field. So I was really glad that they came in a little bit, and I think they'll do a lot of good work out there because a lot of their families have kids that play out there too. So they'll be stamping their name on that as well, and a local company out of Wyoming. So if you have any other questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, I would look for you to approve this project.
Thank you, Dave. Council questions for Dave this evening?
Madam Mayor, I have no problem making a motion that we hire Peterson Companies to the tune of $141,420 for the Fenway Field Rehab Project as presented by Dave.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. If we could just, thank you.
In the motion, it's adding a 10% contingency, just like we kind of did at Belt, so I don't have to come back with a change order just in case they have to move baseball
I'll amend
pegs
my
or-
motion to that for the 10% contingency.
Amended motion and
I'll second.
second the amended motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, and motion carries. Next item for consideration this evening, the airport manager RFP, and Christina.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, so we've been talking about the airport lots over the last 6 months, and there's been questions about management out there. We had conversations at our last joint meeting with the Airport Commission in June about the need for minimum use standards or airport guidelines. In the past, we've had a hangar owner essentially volunteer his time, as I understand it, to be the manager. When he left, then the previous assistant administrator had the duties added to his job description. And I think, at least from a staff perspective, we've just come to realize that there's a need to bring a level of expertise to manage the airport, develop policies, negotiate and enforce lease provisions, and provide better oversight that we just can't do with current city staff and all of the other combined duties. So in your packet is an RFP, request for proposals, that I've put together after reviewing examples from across the country, ran it by Dave and Amanda as well to get some local feedback. What's in there is a proposal that would seek a firm or an individual to serve as an airport manager for a 2-year time period, and that's something certainly council could provide feedback on as far as how long we might want to have somebody come in. And the goal is to eventually, I think, get the airport to a place where city staff can manage it in addition to their other duties. But right now, there's just so much work that needs to be done that we feel we need to bring somebody in. So that's why I say there could be some discussion about how long council might think that takes to happen. But as of right now, it's drafted with 2 years, and certainly the city can reevaluate at the end of that time period if they want to extend it or not. The RFP also lays out the scope of services that include the development of those minimum use standards or airport guidelines that we talked about in June. It also includes covering administrative tasks, operation and maintenance, but again, Public Works is still doing the snow removal and mowing. It's more just maintaining the operations out there, equipment, property leases. If the airport had to be closed in emergency, communications and meetings, being that point person for helping coordinate the fly-in or attending airport commission meetings and whatnot, and general expectations. So, and also because there might be things out there that we just don't know, that since we're not experts, it does allow the opportunity for the proposer to suggest additional services that aren't listed there that they may think we need. So another topic for discussion or consideration by the council is, as it's drafted right now, it doesn't require any minimum number of days, hours of days throughout the week that the airport manager would be on site. It's kind of left open-ended. We've certainly hear about issues out there of all days of the week and times of the day, but I'm not sure how we plan for that while also balancing the financial reality of having somebody on site all the time. So it was more about them at least being available by phone and email in the case of emergencies and setting their own expectations for being on site. Also just want to call out that the RFP does take the approach that the new manager would take on more of an economic development approach out there, coordinating with the EDA, marketing opportunities out there, things like that. I know this is, again, a higher level policy discussion for the council to really give direction about what they see as the future for the airport. I included in there, honestly, just again, because I saw it in some other examples from across the country. But if that's not the direction and we want it to be more of a recreational use, we can certainly make changes to that language. Let's see. So we do list in there some minimum requirements that they have 5 years as an airport manager at a similar or larger sized airport, or any combination of training, education, experience that meets that in the city's sole discretion. If council approved tonight issuing this request for proposals, it would be due on August 23rd, probably in early September. Then staff would begin scoring those, identifying folks if we think we need to bring them in for interviews. We could run it through the airport commission in either late September or perhaps their October meeting if they stick with their every other month meeting schedule. Since I'm new to this, I have no idea what you can expect for costs, so I didn't even want to venture anything. And as I've discovered on a few other things, whether it's the medians or a space needs study, the costs have really gone up over the last few years too. So I'm not sure that it would have been helpful to reach out to some of these folks that had done it in the past. So with that, I'll stand for any questions, and again, just looking for council direction on those things if you want to change it, or affirmation that we leave it as is.
Thank you, Christina. Council's just open it up. Thoughts, feedback?
I think you did a nice job pulling together a request for proposal. I mean, I think it highlights and calls out the things that we maybe feel are most critical, from an initial standpoint. And I fully suspect that we're going to probably get stuff from all over the board in terms of what people might come back and say they need from a time commitment to accomplish this, and the cost will be varied as well, but it'll give us a good starting place to continue the conversation, figure out what makes sense for us at the end of the day. And I think the 2-year time frame is good. I don't want to handcuff some group to a year, but of course, the final contract will have an escape clause of some fashion, so it doesn't lock us into anything that we don't want, I would assume. So I think it's a really good starting point.
Thank you. Other points of feedback? Thoughts?
I think it's a little bit much for this airport. If you're looking for somebody with these qualifications, our income there would never pay for it. It would never pay for it. So I think there's some other ways that it can be done. The last thing that Dave needs too is another layer of bureaucracy when he's already out there doing 90% of the work out there. And so we got to be very, very careful. There's nothing wrong with getting a proposal. We just got to be careful how we go about it. All there is to it.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a good start, and it'll be interesting to see the responses that we get. I think, like Councilmember Erickson said, they'll probably be varied. So makes me a little bit nervous, but it'll also be interesting to sit nonetheless. So yeah, I think it's somewhere to start, and we'll see.
Councilmember Burpitz?
I think the professional management of this is crucial. It's why we're in the place we're in right now, the issues we've had, potential lawsuits, emergency situations. It's needed, and I appreciate the effort that's gone into this, and look forward to seeing what we get back.
Yeah, I've fielded some questions, just kind of questioning like why do we need to do this? And I look forward to having a broader conversation on the why when we have those proposals back and we're kind of digging in further into the scope of services and pricing that out. But I would just offer up a couple of things. One is I looked through the RFP, from a lens of what do I think doesn't need to be on here? And there really wasn't anything that I would say, that's just absolutely not needed. I think it's more of how might that be bundled together and what does that look like from a cost perspective? And so I think we need to get to the next stage to have that conversation. And then the other thing I would point out is the option that was previously funded, or the option that was previously staffed, in that this, kind of went through our assistant city administrator, that position isn't here anymore and isn't going to be here. So we don't have that option on the table. And in absence of that, a lot of this has fallen to Christina. And that is just, I appreciate she's taken on that work, and I appreciate you've jumped in and you've done a lot in 6 months, but that also is not part of what we want that job, the city administrator job, to be. That's also fully general fund funded, and we need the airport to, we need this position to manage the airport, and in absence, it kind of ends up in default on our city administrator's desk, and I think that's just reached a level of, we kind of have recognized the gaps, which brings this proposal forward tonight. So I do think we need to, as we're considering that next proposal, engage a conversation with the airport commission. I suspect we'll have some conversations also on scoping, to your point, and what's needed. But I think we need to see kind of what gets proposed back. Percentage of time, we're reaching out to experts, and they're going to kind of look at our current airport operations, and they're going to have some professional opinion on what that percentage of on time should be. So I'm happy to support this tonight. Any other comments, or anyone have any amendments or changes they'd like to see? Otherwise, we might be ready for a motion if anyone's ready.
I'll make a motion to approve the issuance of a request for proposal for airport manager.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. Our next item this evening and our final final action agenda item for the evening is consideration of 7I, which is Resolution 723-0404, accepting donations for arts in the park. And as part of this, we have 4 different businesses that have provided donations specific to Arts in the Park for our Kids and Family Night: State Farm, the Neil Peterson Agency at $150, Keep It Up Tutoring at $150, Maple Tree Pediatric Dentistry at $150, and Shopco Optical at $150. And I would move that council approve with gratitude Resolution 723-0404. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. Let's move to staff updates with our new seating configuration. I guess let's start with Amanda, and we'll just come down the line. We'll skip council. We'll do council at the end, but Amanda, you're up.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
All right. Christina.
Nothing for me either.
All right. And Ryan.
Mayor, City Council, just one update. There will be a detour posted starting next Tuesday. Xcel Energy's got some gas main replacement to do along County Road 50. So westbound County Road 50 between Highway 61 and Goodview will be closed down, and the detour will be northbound on Goodview and west on 210th out to the roundabout. Eastbound on County Road 50 at that intersection area will still be open. It's anticipated that'll last 2 to 3 weeks. So they just don't have enough room to not encroach into the westbound lane. So
Brian, didn't that get postponed?
it did. It was supposed to happen. Was it this Monday or the Monday before? So they just alerted it. It's been rescheduled for Tuesday, July 30th.
Thank you. Kevin.
No updates.
Very good. Jolene.
No updates this evening.
Eddie.
No updates.
Dave.
No updates.
Chief Newman?
Mayor and Council, I just have one update. I would like to thank Corey Murphy for his 5 years of service to the city as the city's building official, and I wish him the best on his future endeavors. He'll be missed.
I echo those comments. Thank you. And Chief Peterson?
Mayor and City Council, no updates.
Very good. Bring up to council for updates. We'll start with Councilmember Roberts.
Really no updates, just I was involved in the Lake Fest Street Dance at Mallards, and I appreciate the work from Public Works, Fire, and Police. It was a great event, no problems that I'm aware of, and it seemed like everyone had a great time, so thank you to the city for that, and staff.
Fabulous. Councilmember Valento?
No updates.
Councilmember Husnick?
No updates.
And Councilmember Erickson?
No updates.
All right, no updates from me either. So we will move into a closed session. I would move that council move into a closed session pursuant to Minnesota statutes 13D05 subdivision 3B for a confidential attorney-client discussion regarding threatened litigation by Northern Plains Aviation Incorporated. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and we're in closed session. This is the last item on our agenda, so after the end of this closed session, we will come back into councils only to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.